I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the glory of his cross.
Good morning, everyone. Our lesson this morning is lesson 24. The Christian's attitude towards hypocrisy. When I started the lesson, I thought, where did the words hypocrisy or hypocrite originate? And obviously, those living in the New Testament times knew what the word meant. Or why would Jesus and the apostles have used the word so often? And the New Testament meaning of hypocrite reflects its use in the Greek stage drama. In the Greek theater, in the plays, the hypocrite was one who wore a mask and played the part on stage, imitating the speech and the mannerisms and the conduct of the character portrayed. The hypocrite, The hypocrite couldn't portray his part effectively without his mask. He had to have the mask on. You know, I thought of a funny story that happened to me. Maybe Gordon Collin might have heard it. It was back when we were at the West End. But it was the first time I had visited a stage play. Tammy and I went down to the theater on King Street, and we went and watched the play that was called Ragtime. And it was quite an experience. Through costumes and all the stage effects, the story was presented to us. And we were in a home in the 1800s of a wealthy white aristocrat who had a colored female house slave. And her boyfriend came seeking her hand in marriage, honorably and humbly. He sought the blessing and the right for her hand in marriage from the white aristocrat. She worked for him. And the scene that followed was too much for me. Unknowingly, I was squeezing Tammy's hand in anger, and the sound of my disapproving words for this white aristocrat started escaping my through my throat. And Tammy instantly sensed the dream that I was in and saved us from total embarrassment by yanking my arm almost out of its socket. But you see, that was the precise purpose of a stage hypocrite, to portray someone or something he really wasn't in order, something that his audience would truly believe, of which I did. Now, the stage play is one of entertainment, okay? But this part of a played in real life is devastating, and certainly not a role to be played by Christians. As Christians, we ask ourselves, what are God's thoughts on I did have that slide.
Yeah,
Sorry,
have that.
I missed that. So what are God's thoughts on the role? God hates it. And we find in Philippians chapter 1 and verse 9 to 11, I put all I started putting the passages back on the PowerPoint. It helps some a little better. But I'll start with Tim, and I'll get you to read that, Tim.
At this I pray that your love may abound still more and more in knowledge and all discernment, that you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ, being filled with the fruits of the righteousness which are by Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God.
Okay, thanks, Tim. We're seeing a difference here between the role of a hypocrite and the role that God would have us play. God desires us to be excellent, to be sincere, to do those things which are righteous. And we are not to play any deceiving role, as we see just with this one verse. Now, depending on what Bible version you use, there's different words for hypocrisy, but all with the same meaning. In Galatians 2 and 13, the word for hypocrisy there is dissimulation. Casey, could you read that, please?
And the rest of the Jews assembled likewise with him, insomuch that even Barnabas was carried away with their dissimulation.
Okay, so the word used there for hypocrisy is dissimulation. And in 2 Peter 2 and verse 3, the word for hypocrisy or hypocrite is fine. Sandy, can you see that? Kind of hard on that angle. Maybe it's a green background. I'll read that one then, that's all right. And in covetousness shall they with fine words make merchandise of you, whose sentence now from old lingereth not, and their destruction slumbereth not.
Isn't that theme?
Eh?
Theme?
Faint.
Fame, sorry, fame. That's my mistake. I asked.
No, it's a word we don't know.
Yeah,
Use
well,
this word.
that's why I put them up, because we don't use these words. And then continuing with the different words, Matthew 23 and 14 reads pretense. Annie, can you see that? Is the green background not good?
No, it's the angles.
Oh, the angle, right. Okay.
Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you do in the widow's houses, even now for vengeance if you allow years. Therefore you shall receive greater condemnation.
Okay. Yeah, I never thought of that. When you're up against that wall, it's hard, isn't it? So pretense is used in Matthew 23 and 14 for hypocrisy. Those words you find in the American Standard and the King James, but they're all the same meaning. So we're beginning to see then that no matter what part is played, Scripture condemns hypocrisy. And to show some points, we begin with the master teacher. And Jesus, when he spoke of hypocrisy, he spoke with strong condemnation. There'd be no way that you could have a mistaken view on what Christ thought. And he begins, our passages begin with hypocrisy in giving. And we find in Matthew 6, verses 1 to 2. Henry, do you want to read that, please?
Beware of that teaching you righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. So when you give to the poor, do not sound the trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do it in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be honored by men. Truly, I say to you, they have their reward in full.
Okay, thanks, Henry. To get the point here, is it wrong for a Christian to help the needy? Should we help the needy? Right, right. And the other thought then is, should it be seen by others? Well, think about it though.
Not necessarily.
Not intention.
Right. It can be seen by others. If done in private or done publicly, makes no difference as far as righteousness goes. Maybe you give somebody $50 on the way home after service for gas. Someone else sees that. Well, that's not wrong. That's not a sin on your part. But it's when we make it known publicly with an excessive display of it for the purpose of seeking praise. Jer?
I said it's like your example. You giving someone $50. Hey everyone, look at me.
Yep.
I'm giving $50 here. Like I said, that's the type of attitude Jesus is talking about.
Right, right. That's the sin. Not the sin that someone sees us. But I found that interesting because as I read about this verse, secular history says that a trumpet would sound calling the poor together, those that needed money at the temple from the Pharisees. A trumpet would sound to gather them together to receive their alms. But really, the Pharisees did it so that all the people would know, and they could come together and see the proof that the Pharisees liberality. In other words, they wanted to make a show of it. They weren't really interested in helping the poor. They were more interested in showing everyone, look how good we are. And that's what Jesus condemned.
And because they were more wealthy, it appeared like they were giving much, but I mean, in comparison to what they had,
right.
It wasn't that much to them, but for someone who is poor, who doesn't have that type of wealth, look at that. Look how much they gave. That's really generous.
Right.
Like as far as it's not that they weren't giving a lot,
no.
but they were doing it to be seen by others to be praised by.
Right, right. They wanted others to see that, which goes back to the purpose of my stage play face. They were putting on a different front, really, than what their hearts were set in. And Jesus also warned of hypocrites in praying. In Matthew 6, verses 5 to 6, Naomi, do you want to read that, please?
And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogue and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they will receive their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. The Jews were much in the habit of praying in public places and at certain times of the day. They always offered their prayers wherever they were. That was their habit. And they would suspend their employment and pay their devotions. And as I thought about that and the attitude of Christians, this practice is even everywhere today, isn't it? The Muslims, I remember I used to have a pickup in the truck on Islington Avenue, And if I was on Islington trying to get to the 401 at 10 in the morning, forget it. The mosque was on the corner and hundreds would come out. And I speak nothing against what each of their attitudes was, but that praying is made public on the news, and Catholics in many places do the same, and it seems also that they seek publicity through that. Is what they're after, and they regard it as the Pharisees as a proof of their great piety. Sure.
And it goes to the same thing that we talked about with giving. It's not wrong to pray in public.
Right.
It's not wrong for others to see you praying in public. The whole idea is the attitude of why you're doing it. Are you praying to be seen by others how religious you are? Or are you praying for a purpose? Because when we pray for a purpose. And I don't know what that purpose might be in one situation, but I mean, there might be a purpose. You might have heard someone had an accident. You pray for them. Like, as far as you don't have to wait till you go inside. But again, you were saying these people wanted the publicity. They wanted others to see them, but it wasn't praying to God.
Right.
It was to receive their own.
Exactly. Which I question, why is it always on our news? Yet our coming together, not that we want it on the news, but it's not made public. There's reasons behind their desire.
Also, when we go out in the public, let's say we would have a prayer, but if we know that people are going to be watching and centering their, paying attention to us, you have to do it privately. So, we only judge. So, I mean, that when we go out, we pray for our truth, and as you
Right.
said, if it's going to be seen by people. I mean, I remember when at work, I just put my hands over my head.
Yes.
And to pray, and everybody, you have a headache. Somebody said you should. So, not to draw attention.
Right. That's right. It's the attitude, isn't it? And we'll point out later another reason why that's so important. But also, Jesus condemns hypocrites who behold motes. In Matthew 7, verses 1 to 5, I have the first 3 verses up. Can you read that, Lisa? Okay, and verses 4 and 5. Cheryl, do you want to read that? Okay, please. Okay, thank you. Does Jesus condemn judging?
Not in Matthew 7. If you go further on down, you have to judge.
Right. In other words, you're saying judging, which has to do with justice, and nor does Jesus condemn forming opinions of the conduct of others, but what he condemns is hasty, rash, unjust judgment, and with the warning, we are moved ourselves to consider the type of expression that we use. we use that phrase, you know, that looks can speak 1,000 words. Those things we have to be careful of in our judging.
And when we have to recognize that, okay, when we judge, we shouldn't judge harshly, and not talking about using strong words. I'm talking about judging in almost like a hypocritical way, because as James would tell us, that when we judge, if we are found in the same sin, we're not going to receive any mercy.
Right.
Because, and that's the danger of hypocritical judging, is yes, you might be pointing out sin, but if you have the same sin in your life and someone finds out that you do, then you're not going to receive any mercy. We should be judging to bring the sinner back, not just to point out that they're wrong.
Right. That's right. And again, it's the lesson back to the whole thought of hypocrisy. Why are we doing that? And we can put on a front, a mask, if you will, that others can't see through. But as Christians, we should have the courage to search our hearts. Why are we doing that? And with judging, sometimes could be multiple reasons for that. You know, it could be jealousy or envy, so we strike out at someone in the form of a judgment of something that they're doing. Like Jer says, well, we're still in sin. And we're worse, so aren't we, by doing that? And also, Jesus condemns hypocrisy in worship. In Matthew chapter 15, verses 7 and 9, we're up to Jeff.
Hypocrites, rightly did Isaiah prophesy of you. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching these doctrines, the precepts of men.
Okay. In this verse, is Jesus speaking to a particular person? Or is he speaking to the nation? What do you think? We could say both, but
He's talking to the Pharisees. It says, rightly did Isaiah prophesy you.
Okay.
He was indicating a specific group of people.
Okay, right. That's a good point. I saw Israel and the whole nation as a national hypocrisy. But that's a good point, Lord. It could be just to the Pharisees and hypocrites. Really, it's to all.
He was, 15 verse 1, he was specifically speaking to the scribes and Pharisees.
Okay.
But you're right, he'd be speaking to anybody who follows the same pattern.
Right.
The scribes and Pharisees were. And that was part of the hypocrisy, is they were leading other people down the same path that they took.
Right.
It wasn't just them, people who were imitating, following the way the Pharisees had.
Exactly. Everyone was following the same offered regular worship, their strict ceremonial observances. They kept the law outwardly, didn't they? But God sees the heart, that's your point, and knows when the heart is not right with Him. And it's a strong warning today, isn't it, for that type of attitude. And also, Jesus uses leaven as an example for hypocrisy. In Luke 11:53 to 54, Paula, please.
When he left there, the scribes and the Pharisees began to be very hostile and to question him closely on many subjects, plotting against him to catch him in something he might say.
Okay, and verse 12 and 1, George.
Under these circumstances, after so many thousands of people had gathered together that they were stepped on one another, he began saying to his disciples, first of all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy.
Okay. As I was reading this verse and thinking about it, leaven, and thinking of hypocrisy, and thinking of hiding behind the mask, leaven passes secretly, doesn't? It passes silently through a mass of dough, and none can see its progress. I guess if we want to say we see the bread rising, then, but until that point, you can't see its progress. And the Pharisees' leaven was their doctrine, and they artfully instilled their traditions secretly in the mind to people. But as for the mind of Christ, we're warned of something about that in Psalms 139, the first 3 verses. Jay?
O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thought from afar. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all.
Okay, as we think of that comparison of the leaven, the Pharisees' leaven, secretly and silently they instilled that. But what does this psalm tell us about God? And thinking about the hypocrisy. What's it tell us about God?
He knows us inside out. He knows us what we're going to say before we say it, our thoughts, if we are going to be hypocrites or not, if we're genuine.
Right.
He knows it all. We cannot hide. We can run, but we can't hide from God.
Right. Right, Kala. And those things, that understanding obviously had no effect on the Pharisees. They would just close their mind to that. But verses like that should, not humble us, they should shake us. That God knows. We can fool others. With the mask of hypocrisy, we can fool others, but we're not fooling God. And a quick history, I thought, of the party politics of Jesus' days. These are the different groups: the Herodians, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, then there was the Zealots and the Essenes. And these groups, Jesus spoke out against all these groups. These were the powerful of Palestine at that time. And Jesus knew them all, and he showed remarkable skill when debating them. That's why we use that term, Jesus was the masterful teacher. But I thought, what did they think of him? Each one of these groups hated Jesus. They loathed him for what he taught in his righteousness. And this is what he was challenged with. And on each on occasion would challenge Jesus. They weren't afraid to challenge him. And they often joined forces pretending to have good intentions in their search for truth. But they were really masking it. And it's interesting that each of these groups had their own different beliefs, but when they came upon Jesus, they would join forces and overlook one another's differences, because their point was to destroy Jesus. And Jesus knew their hearts. And in Matthew 28 and 18, he called the Pharisees hypocrites. And in Matthew 23, he uses that term 8 times. 8 times to describe their hearts. And we look at Matthew 16 and verses 1 to 4. Tim, can you read first 2, please?
The Pharisees and Sadducees came up, and testing Jesus, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven, but he replied to them, "When it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red."
Okay. And 3 and 4, Casey, please.
And in the morning there will be a storm today, for the sky is red and red. Do you know how to discern the appearance of the sky, but cannot discern the signs of the times? An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and a sign will not be given it, except the sign of Jonah. And he left them and went away.
Okay, thank you. What I see here is Jesus' fairness in a way. He's challenging their conscience with this insight. And it's interesting that something that which remains consistent in this world, even today, in the world of nature, it can be trusted and made into common judgment, yet the Pharisees and people today, men, refuse to acknowledge God's wisdom. We can see, that's what I take out of these verses. When we see these things, when we get up in the morning and see the red sky and the threatening, then that's what we say. I forget what the saying is. The red sky at night's a sailor's delight, and 90% of the time, that's correct. And in the morning, we see the warning. And yet, we understand that, and we can almost 90% of the time call it, but we refuse to see God's wisdom. And God points that out here.
Hypocrisy is blinding. Sometimes we don't realize, sometimes we know we're being hypocrites.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't. But hypocrisy can blind us to the truth. Someone comes along, you're being hypocritical. No, I'm not.
Right.
Like as far as, sometimes that will blind our judgment. And that's the Pharisees and all those other people hated Jesus because he told them the truth and they were blinded by their own actions. Either they wanted to do it, even though Jesus said no, or they didn't think what Jesus was saying was right.
Right, exactly. Jeff?
This passage reminds me that some people say we can't all understand things the same way. But Jesus always expected people to understand things the same way. I mean, this is pretty simple. Everybody could understand the morning by the look of the sky that weather would be bad. He expected them to understand what was happening at the time and understand the same way.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Well, we can understand things like this. As I said, 90% of the times, sometimes you put out on the lake and half an hour later a storm comes along. But the point is, like you say, we see these things and we can understand them, yet we refuse to see God.
But they fail to realize who Jesus is. He knows it all. He knows your hearts and thoughts before you even speak it. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the others, they were like trying to test him. And if they don't even know that Jesus knows it all. But the Pharisees think they're so up there because they're the elite of that time. But that's as far as they can see. because you cannot see God, you cannot know His thoughts and actions. Sadducees, same thing. What is
Right.
that?
That's right, pal. Yeah, it's exactly true. You know, with the thought, sometimes Jerry made me think, you know, if you're caught in this act and someone tells you you're being a hypocrite, sometimes you will say no, because all of a sudden now you have to take that mask off. And even still, even when confronted with it, you don't want to be caught, do you?
I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor to